Maybe you're listening to today's show and you have a alcoholic problem. Or maybe it's not you, it's someone that you know, maybe a spouse, maybe a friend, maybe a child, and they are an alcoholic. Maybe you're someone that says, well, I need a drink or I need to drink to ease the pain. And I can't control it and I need help. Well, I'm here to tell you that you are listening to the right show and you're at the right place today. Today's show is entitled Understanding and Overcoming Alcoholism. And we want to invite you to stay tuned. I'm your co-host, Bettina Davamar, and with me in studio is award-winning psychotherapist Michael Hart of Elam Counseling Services. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Bettina. And it is so good to be in studio with you again to do another important topic. I think this topic of alcoholism is a very important topic, especially for this time of year as we enter into the Christmas season, where many people will be drinking and their spirits will be merry, as you say, maybe a little too merry for some people's liking. And so it's important for us to talk about alcoholism, the effects of alcoholism, and look at some of the studies that have been published about alcoholism, the effects it has on people's lives and their health, and also look at biblical passages that talks about the effect of alcoholism. And you know that when we do these show, we like to take the biblical perspective as well. So we will be looking at what the Bible has to say about alcoholism as well.
That's right, Michael. I think it's extremely important to understand it. So I'm wondering, is there a biblical story or verses that you would like to use to launch into today's show?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think the story of Abigail and Nabal in 1 Samuel chapter 25, it's a very to the point. That passage is very to the point of what we are talking about here today. Because if we read that passage carefully, we will see that Nabal had a drinking problem. Yeah. And this, as the story unfolds in 1 Samuel chapter 25, we read that David and his men, these were warriors, mighty warriors, who came to Nabal, this farmer. So he's a farmer and he has no army. He has wives and children and a few servants, but he's very wealthy. And David and his men had provided protection for Nabal. And so that we are told that David and his men were like a wall, according to the one translation, that they were like a wall of protection around Nabal and his flock, protecting him from outside enemies. And so one day when David and his men were in need of sustenance, in need of food, they came to this wealthy man that they had protected for some time and asked him for some supplies. And instead of kindly giving of his wealth to David and his men, instead he hurled insult at them. And I think at that point, when Nabal is doing this, he's probably intoxicated. If we read the story carefully, we will see that he was probably not in his right mind. He was probably drinking and not understanding the gravity of what he's doing. He's hurling insult at these warriors, and when the servants heard what Nabal was doing, they were astonished because they couldn't believe he would be so stupid as to putting himself at that risk. So one of the servants came to Abigail, Nabal's wife, and said, "You can't believe what your husband just did." And they outlined to her what happened. Wow. And when Abigail heard, she went on a mission to prevent bloodshed, because she realized that he had just insulted mighty warriors and he was in no place to protect himself. And so we are told in the story that Abigail took the supplies to David and pleaded with David and his men, saying, "Don't listen to my husband." And she actually said, "He's a fool. Don't listen to him. He's a fool." And so David took the supplies and said to her, "You have prevented much bloodshed today." And so his soldiers put their swords back down and they enjoyed a meal, and then she came home. And this part of the story is very important, and it's a part that we often miss. We are told that when she came home, that her husband was drinking and he was drunk. And he was so drunk that Abigail realized that she could not talk to him in the state of drunkenness that he was in. So she waited until the next morning when he was sober. And then the Bible tells us that she told him everything that had happened. And in verse 36 of 1 Samuel 25, when Nabal heard the next day what he had done, what he himself had done, he had a heart attack. And that 10 days later, he died. So you can see that this man, the gravity of it, he realized that what I did the day before was so serious. My entire family could have been killed. He had a heart attack. And maybe you're listening to the show today and you can relate to this in some way, because the things that your alcoholic spouse does when he's drunk, the next day he has no clue what he had done and the seriousness of what he has done. Maybe it's flirting at a party with others. Maybe it's having inappropriate behaviors. Maybe it's telling off the neighbors. Maybe it's incurring great debt while in a state of intoxication. And then the next day, when those things come to light, many alcoholics have no memory of what they have done, and some even deny that they could have done such things.
Michael, this is such a sad story. One of stories in the Bible that always boggled my mind. The fact that Abigail had to go and, pretty much cover her husband after what he's done. And so I'm just wondering, is there any research? We see that Nabal had a heart attack. Is there any research linking drinking with heart attacks?
Yes, actually there is. There is this publication that was done by the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction. And one of the health risks that they say alcoholics have, or one of the health consequences of alcohol abuse or drinking too much alcohol, is congestive heart disease or congestive heart failure. So the publication is saying that there is a link between drinking and cardiovascular diseases, such as people who end up with congestive heart failure. And so it's not surprising that the Bible is telling us that Nabal, this person who drank so much that he actually became known as a fool, actually had this disease.
So we see that it's not surprising due to the research. Now, I'm wondering if there's other health risks that are associated with alcohol.
The publication goes on to say that there is a link between certain types of cancer and alcoholism. There's also liver cirrhosis that is linked to alcoholism, hypertension, and diabetes is also linked to alcoholism. They're saying also that it's possible that breast cancer may be higher in women who drink than in women who don't. So there's a lot here from this publication that is showing that alcoholism has tremendous impact on a person's health. But Bettina, we could also look at the impact that it has on the lives of people. How many people have been killed by drunk drivers?
Right.
The high percentage of people who drink who end up injuring themselves and ending up in the ER because of fights that they get into. So there are a lot of negative consequences pertaining to the use of alcohol.
So there's a big deal with fentanyl, Michael, these days. People taking fentanyl and other types of drugs. How common is alcohol compared to other substances?
Okay, so if we take a look at let us look at it in terms of demographic, for example. So if we look at it in terms of the age 15 and over, 76.9% of the population, according to the same research by the Canadian Centre on Substance Use and Addiction, 76.9% of Canadians use alcohol, compared to only 12.3% who use cannabis.
Wow.
And only 1.2% of the population uses cocaine, and 0.7% use ecstasy and other drugs. So we can see that alcoholism by far
Absolutely.
outranks
Yes, it does.
the others. As a matter of fact, the total of all the other use does not come close. If we look at adults 25 and over, look at that demographic. The statistics are similar. 77.8% of alcohols, of adults in that age group use alcohol. Only 9.9% use cannabis.
Wow.
And 0.9% use other drugs and other substances. Only 0.8%, for example, use cocaine in that demographic. And so the percentage used for alcohol, again, in that demographic of the population is very high. So whatever demographic you're looking at, the use of alcohol, the percentage of people who use alcohol outranks those that use other substances by far. And so alcohol is very, very common. And I think we're doing our students a disservice when we talk to them in school about avoiding hard drugs such as cocaine and ecstasy and so forth, and do not tell them about the destructive nature of alcohol, because alcohol is far more damaging, does far more damage in society than those other substances combined.
So, Michael, with everything that you've been saying this morning, I'm understanding more and more that alcohol is a huge problem. I remember being in high school, and the students there, a lot of them, the death rate was really big when it was associated to alcohol, drinking and driving, and they would die. And every year it would just happen and happen. It wasn't the drugs, it was the alcohol. And so I'm so glad that you pointed that out, that alcohol is far more like a risk than the other drugs. And so, Michael, when does drinking become a problem?
That's a very good question, Bettina. There is this method of assessment that's called the CAGE method. And the C is for cut down. If you have ever had the feeling that you need to cut down on the amount of alcohol that you're drinking, it has probably become a problem. If you can answer yes to any of these four letters, these four questions that make up the acronym CAGE, then it's probably a problem. So the C is for cut down. If you are feeling that you have a need to cut down, or others around you have been telling you that you need to cut down on your drinking, it has probably become a problem.
Right.
And it's good to note, it's important, I should say, to note that for alcohol, alcoholics, they are sometimes in denial. They are the last one to think that their drinking is a problem.
True.
But relatives usually know. So if your relatives have been telling you that you need to cut down on the amount of alcohol you're consuming, then your drinking has probably become a problem. The A is for annoyed, and this is very interesting, because if people are telling you that you need to cut down, and you are so annoyed at them for thinking that you need to cut down, why do they think I need to cut down? And you feel annoyed that people are telling you that you need to cut down on the amount of alcohol that you're drinking. Your drinking has become a problem. So the C is for cut down, the A is for annoyed, and the G is for guilty. If you have been drinking and things have been happening in your life where you're beginning to feel guilty about the things that people have been telling you that you do or say when you're under the influence of alcohol, then that's a clear indication that it has become a problem and that you need to cut down or to stop the drinking that you're doing. And the E is another funny one, I should say, funny in a sad way. Yeah. But the E is for eye-opener. If you're
Right.
listening and you have ever felt that you need to take like an eye opener in the morning, like you're so out of it that to start your day you have to have a eye opener in the morning to get going, then you are probably an alcoholic, or your drinking has probably gone to the place or to an extent that you need to consider getting professional help. So the acronym CAGE. But on top of that, other good indications that you are drinking too much and that you need to cut down on your drinking or stop drinking altogether is if it is beginning to affect your relationship with those
Right.
around you.
Yeah, that's huge.
So if you're annoyed, people around you are probably being affected. People around you are probably seeing the damaging effect that your drinking is having. And so if it's affecting your relationship, then it's a problem. If it's affecting your social interaction with others, you're getting into conflicts and fight, like maybe at the cottages on the weekend, you drink a little bit too much and you get into these conflicts with others, and then the next day you are sorry when you sober up. Like Nabal, you're probably drinking too much, and it's time to consider getting help to stop. And so if it's affecting your personal relationships, your social life, your occupation, and even your health.
Right.
There are people who have gone to doctors, and doctors have been saying that you need to stop drinking. It's now affecting your liver, or if you
Right.
don't stop, we can see signs that it's going to be a health problem. Those are clear indication that you're drinking too much. So if you see any of these symptoms, if you can identify to any of the questions in the CAGE acronym that we have talked about earlier, or you're being affected in any of these ways, whether in your relationships, your social life, your occupational life, or your health, then these are clear signs that you need to stop drinking. There's some of you listening who have DUIs, and if you're drinking to that point where you have a DUI, drinking under the influence charges, and you're stopped drinking, don't get annoyed at people around you who are telling you to stop. They're trying to help you, because the last thing you want is to kill yourself or to kill someone else because you're driving drunk.
Michael, that is so important what you just said. And I'm just wondering, is there any, just to understand even more and get to a deeper level now, are there any generational influences or genetic influences?
Yes, I think that's such an important question as well, because in Christian circles we talk a lot about generational curse and generational patterns, and the studies bear out that there is a strong generational component when it comes to alcoholism. As a matter of fact, the studies that I have researched says that if one parent drink, there is a 20% probability that the children will drink. If if you have a household where two parents are drinking, the possibility of the children being alcoholic, or of at least one of the children drinking as well, increases from between 20 to 50%.
Wow.
So we can see that there is a strong generational influence. Now the statistics gets even more interesting when it comes to this genetic or this generational influence on drinking. And if you're a son of a father who drink, if your father drink and you're the son, there's a 50% probability that you will be a drinker as well. Now it gets even more interesting than that. If your father drank to the point where he's a severe alcoholic and he has had criminal charges because of alcoholism, like maybe DUIs or got into fight while drunk or other criminal charges because of alcoholism, you have a 90% chance, according to the studies, if you're a son of such a father. So in our retreats that we do genograms, and we believe that there is also a spiritual component in a lot of these instances. So there is the psychological, there is the genetic, and there is the the conditioning based on the household that you grew up in. But I also believe that there is a spiritual. It's not just nature or nurture, but I think there is a spiritual as well. And I think there is also a need for prayer over your family, over your generation, to break these influences, because the link is very, very strong.
And Michael, we're discussing all this and the gravity of it, and we're getting an understanding, which is awesome. And now there may be some listeners today tuning in, and they're wondering, okay, I'm seeing myself here. I'm in trouble. I don't know what to do. I got the understanding. I need help. But is there hope? Is there hope for that listener that is saying, okay, I've hit rock bottom?
There is hope. The studies also show that for people who are motivated, and that's a key word, if you are motivated to get help, if you have listened to this show today and you said, well, I am motivated and I'm going to do something about my drinking. If you're motivated, the studies show that there is a 70% recovery after 18 months of treatment. And I think it's important for you to get the treatment to help. And that treatment might mean be working with a professional that understands how they can help you to gradually cut down the amount of alcohol that you are consuming, working with an addiction specialist that can help you to cut down your alcohol use. There is a 70% chance that after 18 months you could be in a different position that you are now. And this might also include joining things like AA groups, Alcoholic Anonymous, or Celebrate Recovery groups. And these groups are very helpful in helping people who are addicted to be motivated, to keep you motivated, because it's hard when you're working through this alone. But when you're in a group, that you're working together as part of a group, the possibility of recovery is very, very high. There's a 70% recovery after 18 months if you are motivated to get help. So let me say that this show today was not to put down anyone. I know that it's an addiction usually has deeper roots, and I think as part of the treatment, it's not only important that you go through the practical part of cutting down on the substance, of the amount of substance that you're using. I think it is also very important to understand the root, because in these generation, when we do generational charts in our retreats and in our workshop, and we see alcoholism going back many years, in many generations, there is usually a root pain that sets off a chain reaction. And until people understand the root causes of why they're drinking, sometimes it's hard to stop. So I would say also get counseling. It can be very helpful in helping you to break that habit. So Bettina, I see that we have quickly come to the end of today's show.
Yes.
And we want to thank you, our listeners, for being with us to listen, be with us and listening to this topic. I think the things that we have talked about today can be helpful. I think I have tried to paint a picture of how serious drinking is. I have also gave you ways of assessing whether or not you're drinking too much. And finally, I've also given you some solutions, some tips as to what you can do to start breaking that habit. I do hope you take the first step and reach out for help. We do have professionals on staff, including myself, who can help you to deal with what's behind the drinking problem. And you can also find out more about this and other topics by going to our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. And you can link to our YouTube channel that has over 200 podcasts such as this one. We would like you to also prayerfully consider making a donation to this ministry, that we can continue to air programs like these and continue to provide counseling help to those in need. So until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services.
And Bettina Davelmeyer.
praying together that God would bless you in all your relationships and to keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.